Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for coming today to this splendid occasion here in the Athens Exchange. I wish to sincerely thank the Athens Exchange and the Athens Energy Exchange for hosting this event. I'll say no more. I will now ask Mr. Kalaitsakis to take the floor.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Athens Exchange. On behalf of NX Group, I would like to thank you for joining us today for the presentation of the 2025-2026 Southeast Europe Energy Outlook prepared by ENE. I feel the need to thank Kostis Stambolis and the ENE team and all the authors and contributors behind this work. This is the kind of regional long horizon analysis that our sector needs. In its over than 1,200 pages, this work includes data and analysis that will certainly keep us busy studying and absorbing in the forthcoming period. Our company, the Hellenic Energy Exchange, has been an ENE member and supporter for quite a few years now, and this is for a simple reason. We have always valued ENE's role as a credible, objective forum for energy issues in the Southeast Europe, an institution that focuses on data and facts and always brings the big picture to the table. A forum that pays special attention, apart from the technical side of our sector of the energy business, special attention to strategy, international relationships, and geopolitics as well. From the perspective of an energy exchange and the operator of power and gas markets, the point I would like to underline is the following. Investment is much harder to take place without organized markets and in the absence of robust market signals, prices. And the outlook does indicate that significant investment will be needed in the region over the next decade to achieve our targets. So with that, I'm pleased to hand over to Mr. Stambolis for the study presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. My presentation will be about the electricity sector. So I tried to make a comprehensive overlook over what is happening in this region. So to build an outlook for Southeast region is really a challenge because we have a lot of peculiarities in this. We have lacking of data, we have a lot of things to discuss. But actually we attempted here to have a comprehensive text that allow the readers to understand what is happening in the region in general terms, and also to see what are the trends for the future. So, of course, the sector in Southeast region follows the challenges that are coming everywhere in Europe, meaning that we have to make the energy transition and go to clean sources, renewables mainly. Also, there is an issue to integrate the market. But also what is very much important, as Mr. Stambolis just mentioned, is that we're in a region that is very sensitive and vulnerable to geopolitical, let's say, disturbances like the war in Ukraine, but also the war in Middle East and all the resources for the fossil fuels. Another problem we had to face here is the lack of data. We used any public source of operation, mainly the transparency platform of NSOE that gives real concrete and accurate information, but there are a lot of missing data, and we had to process a lot of data in order to come to some conclusions. And another attribute of the region is that we have, as you know, a lot of countries that don't follow exactly the European legislation, so have actually, I would say, two kinds of countries that are participating in the system. So concerning the characteristics of the region, we have a variety of landscapes in the sector because of the different level of harmonization with the European framework. The electricity mix is still, as you will see, under coal in many states, especially the non-EU countries. Concerning the grids are rather sparse. They're not so well meshed as in the Central Europe, so it causes also a lot of problems to resolve in this region. We need to say that the generation capacity, I think some data were given already by Mr. Stavoulis, is still, the coal is still present here in the region, although some countries, especially Greece and Romania, have made a lot of attempts, and they have actually achieved to be independent, not to reduce their dependencies for fossil fuels. And if we'll see that the installed capacities are actually what we do invest in and what we do develop now in terms of the generation in Southeast Europe and especially the Balkans is mainly renewables, as you can see clearly here, and especially solar PVs. You see here how is the installed capacity. You see that some countries like, what is this? Like Serbia, North Macedonia, Bosnia are still in very much dependent on coal. You see clearly that we have a peculiarity of energy mixes in the region. For example, Albania is almost a hydraulic system. Serbia, Kosovo are very much dependent on lignite. Concerning renewables, we see that we had actually a big growth during last years, especially in the PVs. You see with the yellow color here, and please take a look to the right side of the slide. You'll see that in the countries that belong to the Union, to the European Union, we had really an explosion, especially in PVs and wind during last year. But what we call the WB6 countries, the countries in the West Balkan, are still lacking this progress. You see that the order of magnitude in the vertical axis is different. We speak for gigawatts or for megawatts for the WB6. So in terms of demand, after COVID, there was a slight increase in demand. And you see in this diagram very clearly that in most of the cases, the load that is depicted by these red spots there is usually more than the production, so it is an important area for several reasons. Concerning generation and supply, more or less have the same picture. We see that we don't have a rebound as expected after the COVID, but there was a slight increase. What is different here is Turkey that had a real development of loads during last years. So you see again what is the energy mix in the region. You see we have still a lot of black, meaning fossil fuels, coal, lignite. You see the nuclear that are being stayed, and we don't have any new additions, but we have only new investments in renewables. If you see by country, you see that Bosnia, for example, Kosovo, Serbia, North Macedonia, Montenegro are still very much dependent on coal, while some other countries like Greece, Italy, Bulgaria have proceeded to develop renewable plants towards the green transition. You see here that the region is a net importer, and this is the annually import-export balances per country. You see that you have most of the countries are importing countries, some of them, mainly Bulgaria and Bosnia, in case of good hydraulic year, are exporters. Concerning transmission, there is a lot to say here, but I will be very brief. Actually, we have 400, 220, 150 kV networks. The infrastructure is old in the region, and we need to renovate. It's overaged, actually, and that causes a lot of problems. Also, we have all the unwanted phenomena that we have in case of sparse networks, meaning a lot of losses, unwanted flows that are dangerous for security, and so on. So what is clear is that we need reinforcements in the network of the region, but also in the interconnectors to the north. There are a lot of lines, about 100, but not enough for what we need to exchange in the region. And what is important to say is that there are a lot of new projects in the region. So we have a budget of about 60 billion for some projects that are already ongoing, but also there are a lot of ambitious plans for huge projects that will connect the region to the south, to North Africa, to Saudi Arabia, or to Germany. What is important to say here is that during last years we had a lot of incidents, but we have some 2 or 3 severe incidents as analyzed in the text. And this is mainly due to the lack of network, but also due to the not modernizing procedures and operations as needed. So, in terms of security and regional coordination, the region is actually served by 4 out of the 6 regional coordinating centers of Europe. It's the north part of the Balkan is with TSE-NET, the south one concerning the EU countries, Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, Italy, are with SELEN-CC, which is in Thessaloniki. There are some, North Italy is served by Correzo, and also the WB6 are currently served by the SCC Regional Control Center in Belgrade. That will change soon. And these countries will be split, other for SELEN and other will go for TSE-NET. Concerning the market, I would say that, of course, there is an ongoing procedure to develop the markets. The level of development is very different in EU and non-EU countries. But although we have this lack in harmonization, up to now, there are day-ahead markets operating and power exchanges as well in all the region, all countries. The day-ahead markets are coupled, hopefully, that allows to increase trading, but also we have, to a large extent, we have also coupled the intraday markets. Of course, the capacity allocation is feasible through the CAO and JAO, the 2 organizations that have been created exactly for this purpose. And also, lately, all countries have and operate balancing markets. Some recent developments, very, very important, is the application of 70% rule in almost all the borders, and also the introduction of 15 minutes products that has already showed some good results, meaning increased liquidity in the market, but also better conditions for renewables and better possibilities for development. This is how the average day-ahead market price evolved in the last years. You see with the green color what happened actually in a Central European country. And as you see, the prices in Southeast are almost constantly larger. And this is something that we noticed for many, many months. And this is due to the lack of transmission network, but also due to the, old-fashioned generation that puts a lot of technical problems and don't allow the full exploitation of renewables. Here we see clearly what is the impact of the growth, the rapid growth of the photovoltaics. You see how the day-ahead prices are actually affected by the sunset effect to the left part of the picture. And also to the right one, you see what is the effect of what we call Dunkelflaute, meaning when we have some days with no wind and no PVs, and how it affects the market prices. So you see here the electricity trade volumes, which are actually increased after COVID, but not enough in order to say that we have a real evolution in this. So concerning the exchanges, you see here that some, as we mentioned before, some countries are constantly net exporters, some other are net importers. Bosnia, for example, and Albania, that are very much impacted by the hydraulic conditions, could be both, depending on if we have a dry or a wet year. Bulgaria is constantly an exporter. Greece, that achieved actually a more than 50% energy penetration during 2025, is now transformed to a net exporter due to the excess power by PVs. So if we want to see this is Southeast Europe at a glance, and especially the Balkan region, we say that it's the less developed region in the Europe, of course, and that reflects the development in the electricity sector. We have differences in the regulations and the legislation from country to country, especially for the non-EU countries, so it actually puts obstacles to efficiently develop the market. So, and this is a procedure that is ongoing through the Energy Community Organization in Vienna. The renewables development is, I would say, impressive in Greece, also in Bulgaria and Romania, but it's lacking in the WB6, in the West Balkan countries that are still very much dependent on the fossil fuels. Also, we see a lack of generation capacity. The region is a net importer, even if there is the potential to stop this, but it's another story. Concerning the network, the transmission network, of course, it's sparse, it's overaged, and of course, we need a lot of investments in the network in order to unify in real terms the region. The market development differs from state to state, and it's something that goes on every day. And harmonization, even if it's lacking for many years, I think that there is a commitment from the non-EU countries to harmonize their national legislation, but as you understand, under these geopolitical circumstances, it becomes more and more difficult. And just on word, the developments in electrification of mobility or in storage are not actually so impressive. They are rather moderate. I would say that there are a lot of plans and a lot of interest, but not a real project yet. So that's from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yannis. I think you covered the most difficult part of the presentation, so I don't need to go in detail. So let's take a broader look on the outlook. As you'll see, over the last 3 years, we have been consistent over the last 10 years, from 2017, 2022, and now 2026. The first one was published in 2011. And we're trying to cover the region from all sides, so that's a difficult undertaking because it requires a lot of coordination effort, several people. As you'll see from the contents, and in the file, the dossier we gave you, there is the contents and the executive summary, so you'll see this. We cover the region in terms of countries, country profiles, but also in terms of sectors. So we have all the sectors: electricity, gas, hydrocarbons, exploration, renewables, energy efficiency, technologies. And we complete this with estimates in terms of investment over the next 10 years. And in order to arrive at investment estimates, obviously, we're tracking the market throughout the year through our various publications. So we have built up a database which can always go back and check on specific projects and figures. And also we have the input from our partners. So this study would not have been able without the contribution of all the people you see here, 27. So we have 27 authors, and we had also about 15 peer reviewers. So our study has been peer reviewed by people in the energy area in different parts of the world. Why a regional approach? The name of our institute speaks for itself. We are Southeast Europe, and right from the start, when we set up the institute in 2003, our outlook was outside Greece. Greece we consider as a very important part of the region, but we consider our area of work the broader region. And we have been proven right, because over these last 23 years, markets have really converged. We have a lot more cross-border trading, we have a lot more cross-border projects, and we have a lot of interaction between the countries. Do we have a unified market? Not yet, but we're very near. I mean, as Yannis Gabouris explained, with the exchanges which are operating in different parts of the region, but sharing the same type of methodology and model, the target model, we're very near there. So, in order to understand the geopolitical, geographic sphere, we need to go regional. And this helps us study, analyze, and understand the region's energy market and structure. It helps us identify the important investment and business opportunities. So, in short, yes, this is an energy atlas of the region, but from an analytical point of view. It's not just presenting the data. Yes, we do present the data, it's absolutely necessary, but we go a step further and we explain why this is the data that appears, what is likely to happen. And in that end, as Mr. Giannakidis will explain to you immediately afterwards, a number of mathematical models are used to understand energy demand and supply in the years ahead under various scenarios. So this has all been incorporated in the present study. This is the area which we study. The blue are the core countries, and the peripheral countries, which are playing more and more important role, are the green ones. And we study both at the same time. Obviously, our major concern is the core countries, but we have to be aware what the green countries are doing, because there are energy flows between these countries and between these regions. So it's important to know what Azerbaijan is doing, what Kazakhstan is doing, what Italy is doing, what Austria is doing. Study scope, obviously, is the critical assessment of the current status of the energy market. Provide comprehensive data, which we do, and also analyze the dynamics of the regional integration process from an energy perspective. And what Yanis Kabouris just showed you, really, he referred to the dynamics of the electricity market. And we end up with the supply-demand consumption. Now, the countries which we consider have different rates of economic growth, but what we see here is a convergence in terms of rates of growth. We have a stabilization effect, as you see here, over the last year. Different growths, 1%, 1.5%, up to 4%. Turkey is moving fast ahead with much higher growth rate. Is this preventing us to study because we have different economies? No. As long as we know what the outlook of the economy is in, we can build this into the models that we are trying to project energy demand. So it is important that we have a convergence in terms of rates of growth, in terms of stability, and this has happened despite the various problems we had with the coronavirus and so forth over the last few years. So the region is reasonably homogeneous in terms of economics to be able to allow us to study this as a group. The energy mix, we divide this in two parts, with Turkey and without Turkey. If we put Turkey, then we have a picture which is very complete, but Turkey covers almost 50% of energy demand and the economies of the region. So if we want to study only the European part, we take Turkey out. But it is important to consider Turkey because there are more and more interactions between Turkey and the rest of the countries in the region. What we notice here between 2013 and 2023, a 10-year gap for the energy mix, we see that we have solid fuels, less solid fuels in the energy mix, natural gas, lower part of lower gas. We have a rise in terms of petroleum products, oil consumption, because of higher population, more motor vehicles, and we have more renewables. So 13% in 2003, 18% now, maybe by the end of 2026 we may be 19%. So already renewables, and I'm referring to renewables because of the attention that is being paid in terms of investment and expectations. So we see that it has already a very solid position in the energy mix, but is not going to move very fast in terms of the overall energy mix. This is including Turkey. Now, if we take Turkey out, we see that solid fuels, that is lignite and coal, we have a sharp drop from 25% to 16%. Gas use is more or less the same. A lot more oil and higher renewables. So The picture is slightly different if we take Turkey out, but the tools we have in our disposal enables us to study both cases at the same time. We face a number of regional issues. Marked divergence between EU and Southeast Europe energy strategies, which John Kabouris showed very clearly when he portrayed the prices, electricity prices in the region and the rest of Europe. We believe that our region is more energy security vulnerable than the rest of Europe for reasons which we explain. There is a high hydrocarbon dependence. Electricity's gas, the entry of gas is altering the supply balance. There is continued lack of adequate electricity and gas interconnections. We need a lot more interconnections as our economies get more electrified. Coal and lignite, as you will see in a minute, continues to be relevant for many countries in the region, despite the decarbonization effort. Nuclear remains a viable option with very positive prospects. And renewables growth impeded due to repeated policy failures and electricity grid constraints. So we have a lot of curtailments, and hence we need a lot more investment in electricity grids, as Yanis Kabouris quite rightly pointed out. So here we see the dependence between 2010 and 2022. There are differences in the differentiations in terms over the last 10 years, but as you see here, many countries are very highly dependent in terms of oil and gas imports. This is the oil import dependency, very high. Gas import dependency, also high for certain countries, not so for Romania, which is becoming a net exporter, not so for Croatia, which covers almost 50%. But all the other countries are almost 100% gas importers. Solid fuel dependency, that is important, mostly thermal gas for the industry. Some countries are very dependent, but this forms a very small part of the energy mix. And now we go to the high share of fossil fuels in the gross available energy. And you see here that there is, again, that is the fossil fuels, oil, gas, and solid fuels. So this gives a very clear picture of the high dependency on solid fuels, on fossil fuels, in all countries of the region. And if we go and see the lignite, because of the decarbonization effort is relevant, some countries, you see here, they still have high dependence on solid fuels. Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Serbia, Kosovo, Greece, and Bulgaria Greece especially is decarbonizing very fast. And Bulgaria, which was very difficult, has made a lot of progress. And of course, Romania. So these three EU countries have made a lot of progress, also Hungary. So you see EU countries have made a lot of progress in terms of decarbonization. Although the decarbonization goals and targets are very clear at EU level, when it comes to the region, there are marked differences between EU countries and the rest. EU countries, as I showed, they are very advanced in terms of decarbonization, but the other countries are having a stiff resistance because they consider solid fuels to be absolutely directly related to their energy security. So this is an issue which we're going to find ahead of us. And we come to the power generation mix, which is different from the total energy mix. And here we see, yes, that if we include Turkey, yeah, we have a small decrease in solid fuels, natural gas. We have, less gas, and we have a lot more renewables. Because we have a lot more renewables, 42% in 2023 compared to 29% before, they have taken share from the other energy sources. And if we take without Turkey, here we see a huge progress in terms of decarbonization. From 41% solid fuels, we moved to 25%, and a lot more renewables, and a lot more gas. So gas is contributing to decarbonization, as you'll see here. The entry of renewables in the region is mixed, but is a success story, as you'll see here. All countries have increased the share of renewables, as Mr. Sofianos will explain later, and we see huge progress as we move towards 2024, 2025, with Turkey being at the top, Greece and Romania following, and then the other countries. But all countries have made actual steady progress in increasing their investments in renewables, which is reflected also in the power generation mix. As part of our regional energy issues, of course, energy security is topping the list. And it's topping the list because of the difficult and unstable geopolitical situation in our region. Take Ukraine in the north, Middle East, North Africa. These are areas which are still in turmoil, geopolitical turmoil. So we have high-risk conflict zones, and therefore we have higher energy security threats more than the rest of Europe. However, over the last few years, we have progress at, coordinated, inspired by EU initiatives, including the emergency and solidarity mechanisms which have been introduced, and the maintenance of adequate oil, which has always been the case for many years, coal, and lately gas stocks. So EU has stepped in, has facilitated the building of gas stocks, and therefore the industry has responded, and therefore now Europe is in a much better situation when it comes to gas supply and possible disruptions of gas supply. So compared to what happened in 2022, now we're in a much better position. But we have to be vigilant because of things happen which we cannot always control or foresee. Security of transportation concerning the shipment of oil and gas, smooth supply electricity, mitigation of possible power supply failures and shortfalls, and minimization of an environmental impact. These are issues which are directly related to energy security. And of course, we go to another area, which is the effective protection of energy infrastructure. Again, this is part of energy security, and we realize that we have to spend a lot more money and time and resources in ensuring that our energy infrastructures are there, intact and operating. And our region has a number of hotspots, which I think we have to point out and realize where they are. And these are the hot spots from an energy security point of view, from the Dardanelles to the passage south of Peloponnese, the north coast of Africa, Suez Canal, the area around Israel and Cyprus, because its proximity to areas where recently we have witnessed conflicts, severe conflicts. The Danube region is another possible area of concern. So for reasons of sometimes nothing to do with outside threats, but climatic threats. For example, Danube, we need always to have a level high because we have nuclear power stations operating across the Danube. So we have a number of contentious issues in Southeast Europe and East Mediterranean. We have geography-related and we have market-related. So geography-related, we have the hotspots, which are referred to above. We have issues concerning the leg of underwater electricity links. We have issues concerning overhead electricity, for example, between Kosovo and Serbia. And we have ongoing supply of Russian crude oil to several countries in Southeast Europe through the Druzhba pipeline. This is continuing to operate despite the hostilities. So there are still areas of concern which touch upon actual conflicts still in the area. And of course, we have market-related. We have several instances where electricity market operation, based on the target one, has resulted in difficulty to justify high prices, as John Kabouris showed you. And then we have volatility issues, and of equal concern are problems faced in gas market in Southwest Europe, where EU market regulation and conflicting gas import policies are preventing smooth cross-border transit, as we've lately seen in the operation of the vertical corridor. We have to look beyond the region in countries like Azerbaijan and then Kazakhstan, because they support part of the supply to the region and to Europe proper. So the Southern Gas Corridor is a very, very important project, as you'll see in a minute. It ensures supply diversification, regional interconnectivity, and of course, strengthening of strategic partnerships. And there is a future expansion potential. Likewise, Kazakhstan, which we depend for oil, Caspian oil production. Kazakhstan is a major exporter to Europe and to countries, especially in a region. So we have transit via the Caspian Black Mediterranean corridor, which right now is under threat because of the hostilities in Ukraine. However, Kazakhstan helps supply diversification, reliability, and scale, and we also consider Kazakhstan as a strategic energy partner. And here you see the expanded South Corridor as it has developed over the last 10 years or so. Really, it started operating in 2020, now it's in 6th year. It's based on the South Caucasus pipeline from Azerbaijan, the TANAP pipeline, which crosses horizontally Turkey, and then the TAP pipeline, which goes through Greece, Albania, and then Italy. And around this South Corridor, which was the prime target of the European Union back at the late 1990s. This is when the first plans were made. And it has developed into something much bigger, because we have a number of pipelines branching off the main South Corridor, like Greece-Bulgaria interconnector, now the interconnector with North Macedonia. We have a lot of LNG terminals tied up, Alexandroupolis, Izmir, Aliaga in Turkey, and new terminals in planning. And of course, we have projects, potential projects like the East Med. All of them happen because we have an actual basic energy artery operating in the region. And this is very important. This energy artery has brought a lot of vitality in terms of energy in all the countries concerned. And electricity interconnections, I won't say more. Yanis explained all this. This is the present situation, electricity interconnections, but apparently we need more. And these are some of the big projects playing right now, which is the Great Sea Interconnector, Greece, Cyprus, Israel, Greece, Egypt, the Greek Interconnector, and the huge project by IPTO, the Green Energy Interconnector, which will bring electricity from the south to the north via the Adriatic and up to Slovenia and eventually Austria and Germany. So this is a project under consideration in the planning stage, very ambitious project. I mean, we're talking about 9 gigawatts to be built in 3 gigawatt segments. Nuclear power is becoming more and more important because of the base load it offers, because of the clean aspect of nuclear energy, zero emissions, and the prospect of units, new units of nuclear power being built in the region thanks to the concept of small modular reactors. So small modular reactors is a promise for the region, because if we manage to get them off the ground, it means that industries in all countries in the region will somehow get involved, because they consist of several parts. And they are, unlike the big nuclear reactors of 1,000 megawatts and above, they can be assembled under industrial conditions. And this offers opportunities for the companies in the region to get involved in the production of such modular reactors. Some countries, especially Romania, are fairly advanced. We expect Romanian small modular reactors to become operational by early 2030, and that will test really the case of cooperation in the region. And here we see the nuclear plants in the region. The next one coming on stream will be the Akuyu plant in Turkey, which it will start with something like 1,200, 1.2 gigawatt, and is gradually going to build up to 5 gigawatt. So it's a very important development. Energy demand and supply projection. I won't say things about this issue because this is going to be covered by George Giannakidis. I would just like to show you one scenario with existing measures and to introduce the concept that we have grouped the region in three. This is the West Balkans 6, the EU countries, and Turkey, which is a case in its own. And here you see the differences in terms of demand projection in the years ahead. Finally, few words about investment. And as you see here, detailed investment estimates in the countries. We come to, over the next 10 years, we come to something like 670 billions. And if we take also the cross-border projects, like pipelines, electricity grid interconnection, this rises up to 711 billion. So we're talking about 70 billion investments in all countries in the region as we move ahead in the next few years. A lot of investment is going to go to power generation, the lion's share, as you'll see here. Energy efficiency is also very important, which Kostas Theophylaktos will talk to you in a minute. And of course, oil and gas, which come now second. But there are still many major infrastructure projects to be built, and you see here the anticipated investment. If we make a comparison to what we predicted in 2021 in the same study, there is a marked difference. At that time, we were predicting something like 468 billion, and now this has risen to about 711. So obviously, the region is attracting investment from outside. This is, I think, the message we want to relay. Key messages. It is important to update energy strategies and policies in view of developments in the geopolitical sphere and also in the market sphere. Solid fuels in the region are going to have some relevance for the years to come. Gradually they're going to go away, but not yet for a number of countries. So it cannot be forced decarbonization. The region is characterized by high oil and gas imports. The outlook for Southeast European upstream oil and gas industry has become somewhat less uncertain as global market sentiment has shifted towards a more favorable stance on fossil fuel development. This shift has boosted investor confidence and improved access to capital for the sector. And we see this clearly in Greece. Greece has attracted interest and is going to attract investment in oil and gas exploration. We have some developments which were announced late last year about Chevron with Energean and Hellenic planning to a major exploration effort in Block 2, with Exxon being active in south of Crete and so forth. So this interest has not gone away. On the contrary, is building up. Peripheral countries are playing a very influential role in the channeling of energy flows. Natural gas is becoming increasingly important and it is really recognized by all as a strategic fuel. And nuclear power remains a viable option. Energy efficiency is coming fast to promote its role as a realistic option. and Kostas Theophylaktos will tell you more about this. However, we still have energy poverty in the region, and this is something which we as an institute are very concerned, and we're in the process of carrying out studies towards this. In terms of security of energy supply, the Southeast region as a whole appears more vulnerable than others, but is not an unmanageable situation, and it's quite manageable because thanks to cooperation and information exchange between the major players in the region. There are still electricity price disparities, so this is an issue which we have to face ahead. Renewables are coming even bigger into the picture, but accompanied by curtailments. And this is an issue for the transmission operators and the companies involved that they will have to face in the next year. So we believe somehow the market has started becoming saturated. So we're not going to see that fast investment in renewables in the years ahead. The market will become more stabilized. Green hydrogen, we have very specific initiatives, and we need some time to see them actually being implemented. Carbon capture, utilization, and storage is firmly in the ground here in Southeast Europe, with Greece playing a very leading role in this area, with several companies having very specific projects. We carried 2 studies on this as an institute. And of course, the investment prospects in the broader Southeast region for energy related, in infrastructure and energy markets, etc., are very, very positive compared to what was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. So with this positive note, I'd like to complete this, and I would like to sincerely thank our sponsors, our lead sponsor, Hellenic Energy, which believed in this project for many years and has supported us, and of course all the other sponsors. I won't name them: DEPA, DESFA, Energean, Hereva, IPTO, who have been very supportive, and a large group of supporters, as you'll see. The important thing is that this study is not just supported by Greek companies, it is supported by Bulgarian companies, by a Romanian company, and a Turkish company. So this, for us, is a vote of confidence, and we are thankful to these companies for believing in this and supporting us in this project. I won't say any more. We will have time to discuss this. I will now pass on to the next presentation, which will be Mr. Roberts. Do we have Mr. Roberts online?
Yes, you do.
Okay, so John, you have the floor.
First of all, my thanks to the sponsors of the Outlook for all the work that they have done that makes it possible to produce an incredible work in terms of both the accumulation of data and the effective analysis that it contains. And then, of course, particularly to Kostas himself for organizing much of this. Now, in terms of energy security, the situation is obviously dominated by the continuing war in Ukraine. Now, there is no real prospect at the moment of knowing just what is going to happen in the immediate future. There are supposed to be peace negotiations in the Gulf. At the same time, the war actually intensifies, not least in terms of energy. So I regrettably have to predicate this on the assumption that the war will continue. First of all, the cost is massive, and the cost is primarily in human terms of actual casualties. That is not the subject of this talk. I just want to state what is truly important to ordinary people's lives. The next element is energy. This is a war that is increasingly being fought with energy as a major focus for targets. If you look at the actions taken by Russia, perhaps the most noticeable are the wholesale effort to destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure and create, in effect, an energy desert. This is quite remarkable in the sense that the campaign was actually intensified at the very time that President Trump was declaring that Mr. Putin had said there would be an energy truce. In terms of regional security, though, we need to focus on other elements of this. Not least, for instance, things like the Russian drone attack on Orlovka at the beginning of August, just as Azerbaijani gas was coming up the pipeline for the first time to enter Ukraine. In other words, it's not just Ukraine itself, but supplies to Ukraine and the transit system that carries those supplies that is endangered. Then there's what Ukraine itself is doing, attacking Russian energy production, distribution, and pipeline systems effectively. In terms of direct impact on Russia, this includes causing the effective termination of Russian gasoline and diesel supplies, exports to the south, notably to Turkey, which has a profound impact also on Russian energy-related export earnings, but also its attacks have been targeted in a long-range manner and in a sustained manner that indicates a capability that threatens perhaps the export of oil and gas to the south. Now, the oil, to a certain extent, can be replaced. Oil is fungible, but it hits the Russian finances much harder than gas because oil earns about 3 or 4 times as much as gas. But the gas cannot be so easily replaced. And then there is the ancillary damage when Ukrainian drones attack or missiles the Russian port of Novorossiysk. They don't just halt or damage Russian export options, they halt or damage Kazakh export options, since Novorossiysk is the principal export port for Kazakh oil reaching the West. So we need to think about how you can find alternative systems for Kazakh energy to reach Europe. And there are no good options whatsoever. I think we have to assume that the sole solution from Kazakhstan's point of view will be to increase its exports to China rather than to the West. Then we look at whether the war's geographical area might be expanded. Is it not just simply possible that Ukraine might interdict Russian exports to the south? Note, not in other directions. But also that Russia might expand its operations. How safe, for instance, are the Black Sea installations of Romania and Bulgaria. What if, by accident, I say ironically, a Russian drone or missile were to hit the Neptune platform or the prospects being drilled at Han Asparuh in Bulgaria? And yes, I'm aware that the first well in Han Asparuh is a dry hole, but the second well is a slightly different formation, and that is to be drilled in the next few weeks. Then there's the question of what happens elsewhere in the region and what the region can do. The biggest elements here are the concept of energy efficiency, which has been very excellently presented already, and the question of renewables. Renewables are both a primary source for energy and a backup. Their primary role is, in effect, to serve to combat climate change. We may live in an era since the Trump inauguration in which major powers and companies seek to increase the involvement of fossil fuels. But the energy transition is not dead. It is being halted, it's being limited, perhaps is the best way of putting it. But it is still vital because climate is an issue that is not going away. You only have to look at the increasing bill facing insurance and reinsurance companies such as Swiss Re for climate change related activities. And this hits ordinary pockets when it comes to everything from house insurance, flood insurance, to giant corporate insurance for major companies and developers in countries, including the United States. So where do we go in terms of what renewables can do? Well, there's a great advantage of renewables in that they serve immediate markets. So if you are faced with the possibility of cut-offs from outside, or indeed interdiction of current cross-border facilities, renewables are helpful because they are local. They help promote one of the great things that the region needs, which is flexibility. Flexibility also requires increased integration. Integration of the kind that enables one country or region to assist another at a time of shortage. That is, in effect, the creation de facto of a unified or at least semi-unified market within the region. And we have heard Kostis say earlier that we're coming close to that. We also heard Kostis talking about the over-reliance on fossil fuel imports. This remains true, not least because there is still a considerable reliance on supplies from Russia. And it's not just that these are politically tendentious to many countries, but they are not necessarily guaranteed to continue so long as the war itself continues. Then we have to think about what this means in general. It means, as we've heard Kostis say earlier, and others will, I'm sure, agree, greater physical security for energy installations. This includes offshore installations, LNG terminals, pipelines, and above all, distribution bottlenecks. So where do we come from when I start trying to reach a conclusion? Well, we've had odd references, but not really a focus so far on one country, and that is Turkey. Turkey is crucial for all sorts of reasons. First of all, it is par excellence the country through which oil and gas supplies reach not just Southeast Europe, but much of the Western world. The great pipelines that come from Azerbaijan that carry not only oil from Azerbaijan, but some oil from Kazakhstan and some from Turkmenistan, and that carry gas. But again, what else can we expect? I think we can expect a growth in the importance of Turkey for one reason. The next phase of Azerbaijani energy exports may well not be, as one would have hoped, an increased supply of gas because of the problems Azerbaijan has in securing long-term contracts for increased gas supplies, which would be crucial to secure the investment needed to develop the source of those supplies. But there is investment underway for increased production of electricity on a very substantial scale, and there is a determination in Azerbaijan to export that electricity. Until last year, there was a focus on such exports being carried to Europe via a cable under the Black Sea. I think because of insecurity in Georgia, let alone insecurity in the Black Sea itself, that is now doubtful. But there is an increasing focus on the concept of energy exports going via the Zanzibar area of Armenia, the so-called Zanzibar corridor that is now to be developed apparently as the TRIP corridor, the Trump International Peace Corridor. That is a 40-kilometer transit of Armenia, for which apparently, we still need confirmation, all sorts of preliminary agreements are there, including how customs would operate. And it would be under American commercial control. Armenian sovereignty would not be diminished. The point of that is that that carries in effect Azerbaijani electricity exports, that would have the potential to carry Azerbaijani electricity exports direct, first of all, to its own external exclave of Nakhchivan and then on to Turkey. So Turkey is important in that regard. It's important also because it serves as a distribution point for things like Azerbaijani gas exports to Syria. It carries a variety of import systems, Russia, of course, at the moment, but also the LNG supplies that come in from the Middle East and notably from the United States. And of course, Turkey is crucial in terms of development of resources in the Eastern Mediterranean and its own development of the giant Sakarya field in the Black Sea. So we have to work with Turkey, and that is not going to be easy in view of Turkey's somewhat strange claims in terms of where it believes its exclusive economic zones are in the Mediterranean. What else should we consider? The East Med, the security it can bring. Problematic given the enormous appetite that Egypt has to swallow all gas produced in the region. Perhaps more important is the role of the region as an importer of LNG, whether it is from the United States or from the Gulf or from North Africa, notably the terminals at Alexandroupolis and round in Croatia, because these are the terminals that can ease the overall energy requirements of the region.
John, can you hear
They're
me?
the ones we must look at. And these are the most, I think, important elements in energy security right now, apart from the question of how do we
John,
address.
can
Yeah,
I-
I'm coming to an end.
Okay.
How do
thank
we
you.
address the issues of an extended Ukrainian war and the possibility of the loss of Russian gas supplies and the need, perhaps, to deal with what we do if Ukraine itself runs short of energy and we have a continuing harsh winter there? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John, very much for very detailed and explicit presentation. Some of the issues that I brought up, John has expanded on, so we now have a much better view of what's happening. So he referred to the actual trouble zones and their impact on energy security in the region. So I now go to renewables, because renewables was brought up repeatedly in John Kaboursis' presentation, my presentation. John Roberts also mentioned renewables. So now we have Nikos Sofianos, who was the author of the renewables chapter in the Outlook. So Nikos, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stambolis. Greetings to everyone. Now, thank you. So, this presentation offers a very clear overview of how renewable energy is reshaping the energy landscape in Europe first, and then in Southeast Europe. It starts with the European energy, the policy directions and trends, the energy and market trends, and then zooms on Southeast Europe, where the energy transition is accelerating and gradually converging with the EU benchmarks. Well, the European Union has shaped its energy and climate strategy around a clear and binding goal. What is this goal? Increasing the share of renewable in total final energy consumption to at least 42.5% by 2030, with an ambition to reach around 45%. We will speak about that later. Progress so far has been significant. By 2024, renewables already accounted for nearly 47% of electricity generation, not final gross energy final consumption, electricity generation across the EU, with wind and solar overtaking natural gas as the main power sources in 2025. Between 2019 and 2030, the contribution of wind and solar grew from 17% to 27%. This is about twice the global average, showing that Europe's power sector decarbonization is now structural and not incremental. Several countries such as Denmark, Portugal, Austria, Sweden, Greece, Croatia, and others already generate more than 65 to 85% of their electricity coming from renewables, while Germany remains the largest market in absolute terms. The EU also plays a leading role globally in clean energy innovation, particularly in wind technologies, electrolyzers, heat pumps, and offshore wind. Now, looking ahead, reaching more than 300 gigawatts in wind energy and nearly 700 gigawatts in solar PV by 2030 will require massive installation rates, around double installation, along with major improvements, of course, in grids, storage, permitting, cross-border interconnections, and so on. Despite these challenges, financial support remains strong, with over 500 billion euros in public funding mobilized in the past 5 years, matched by comparable levels of private investment. Southeast Europe is undergoing a rapid and increasingly strategic energy transition as countries seek to reduce fossil fuel dependence and align with the European decarbonization objectives. Most countries have set targets to raise renewables to from 30 to 45% of total final energy consumption by 2030, very ambitious goal, reflecting a clear shift in long-term energy planning. Regional final energy demand is estimated about 500 to 600 terawatt hours per year, with heating and cooling accounting for around half, underscoring the importance of renewables needed beyond electricity. Bulgaria and Romania and Greece and Croatia stand out as front-runners, having exceeded their 2020 targets and maintaining ambitious diversification paths. In the Western Balkans, hydropower remains dominant, but modernization and diversification toward wind and solar are accelerating. Turkey has emerged as the region's largest market, with around 60% of installed capacity from renewables and the only significant geothermal presence, while Greece is among Europe's fastest growing markets, with only 75% of renewable installed capacity, supported by advanced regulatory frameworks. Cyprus combines global leadership in solar thermal with constrained renewable, of course, electricity deployment due to the system isolation. Overall, Southeast Europe is moving toward a more diversified and resilient renewable energy system, although progress, of course, remains uneven across countries. Based on this table, Southeast Europe is currently in a very transitional but clearly upward phase in terms of renewable energy penetration. The present situation shows that most countries still operate at moderate levels of renewable energy in gross final consumption. This table reveals a strong and broadly shared policy commitment to accelerate the transition, as nearly all countries have set significantly higher targets for 2030. Looking ahead now, the targets indicate the future progress will depend not only on expanding renewable electricity generation, but increasingly on decarbonizing heating, cooling, transportation sectors where renewable penetration remains comparatively low today. Overall, the outlook for Southeast Europe appears positive, relative positive, if national targets are supported by sustained investment in grids, storage, regulatory stability. The region is well positioned to move from a fragmented and uneven landscape toward a more integrated, mature, and resilient renewable energy market by 2030 and beyond. Technology trends. Solar photovoltaics have emerged, of course, as the fastest growing technology, driven by falling costs, rapid deployment, and supportive policies, particularly in Greece, Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia. Onshore wind continues to expand steadily, while offshore wind is gradually moving from planning to early development stages as regulatory and grid frameworks mature. Hydropower remains the backbone of renewable electricity generation, providing stability and flexibility, of course, which is very important, but growing exposure to climate variability is reinforcing the need for complementary solutions for hydro. In this context, energy storage expanding rapidly across the region and gaining strategic importance with pumped storage project, battery systems, hybrid systems also, combining renewable with storage or hydro assets are emerging as the next phase of deployment, enabling higher penetration and improved system stability. At the same time, and this is very important, grid digitalization, artificial intelligence, smart metering, and of course energy communities are becoming critical enablers supporting system integration and greater consumer participation in the energy transition. A comparative assessment of renewable energy performance in Southeast Europe during 2020-2024, 5 years, reveals significant divergence in both the pace and structure of national transitions. Greece and Romania stand out as top performers, combining rapid capacity growth with increasing technology diversification under stable policy frameworks. Turkey has achieved large-scale expansion in absolute terms across multiple renewable technologies, but its overall renewable share remains lower due to the size of its electricity system and continued reliance on non-renewable capacity such as natural gas, coal, etc. Cyprus and North Macedonia show strong relative progress from smaller bases, while Serbia, Montenegro, and Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina lag behind due to slower policy implementation and limited investments. Across the region, a common structural weakness persists: heavy dependence on hydropower, alongside underdeveloped biomass, biogas, geothermal sectors, highlighting a key opportunity, however, for future diversification and system resilience. The last one is the financing instruments. Today, auctions dominate large-scale deployment, while contracts for difference are emerging as a more balanced risk mitigation tool. Corporate power purchase agreements, PPAs, are gaining importance as market mature, although their expansion remains uneven due to grid constraints, currency and credit risks, and weak contract enforcement, especially in the Western Balkans. At the same time, green bonds, crowdfunding, and green venture capital are emerging but remain underdeveloped, with green bond showing the greatest potential despite capital market limitations. Carbon pricing, particularly through the EU emission trading system, increasingly supports renewables. Overall, the financing landscape is diversifying but still fragmented, highlighted the need for stronger regulatory clarity, risk mitigation, and regional coordination to mobilize private investment at scale. Some conclusions: Southeast Europe is rapidly converging with average European Union renewable energy performance, with several countries in our region already matching or exceeding EU benchmarks in electricity generation from renewables. As renewable penetration rises, the core challenge is shifting decisively from the installation of new generation capacity towards strengthening the underlying energy system. Now, this includes the reinforcement and expansion of transmission and distribution grids, the acceleration of cross-border interconnections, and, of course, the large-scale deployment of energy storage solution capable of providing flexibility, as we saw, balancing and seasonal adequacy. If, and we notice this, if supported by coherent policy frameworks, targeted investment and coordinated regional planning, Southeast Europe has very strong potential to evolve into a strategic green energy hub, contributing not only to its own energy security, but also and decarbonization, of course, goals, but also to the broader European energy transition. Now, let me make a short comment. As we saw in the presentation, the target that European Union set, it's very ambitious. It's 42.5% in the gross final energy consumption. So the question that arises is why European Union set such ambitious goal. The EU average now of RES penetration in the European Union is about 25%, low, far behind the goal that we have to achieve. And as you can understand, some countries are lower, about 15% of RES penetration. Greece stands around 21%. And some realistic scenarios shows that even with a huge penetration of RES, by 2030, we will succeed something around 27-28% of RES penetration in our final energy consumption. So why this goal, this ambition goal? Because, and I will agree with Mr. Roberts, renewable energy sources are considered to be now from the European Union as the main and catalytic and strategic geopolitical instrument, mechanism, mean in order to achieve to decrease the energy dependence. Now, how we can achieve that? Is possible to achieve this very optimistic goal? Well, the answer is yes. Some specialists say that we must have a growth rate of about 25%, 30% even, penetration, RES penetration, in order to achieve this goal by 2030. No, we don't need such kind of growth rate. We need only 5 to 7%, maybe for countries of the European, of our region, maybe a little bit more, something about 10% growth rate, and a massive investment in energy efficiency. Well, the key solution is not to increase the pie, but to decrease the pie, the energy consumption, and then we will be near, not to the absolute goals, but near the goals, maybe not to the 40%, but very near. Greece, with this kind of scenarios, will be around 35% in RES penetration in the total final energy consumption. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nikos, for explaining the RES, the renewables situation in depth. May I now call Kostas Theophylaktos, who is going to expand on energy efficiency.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much Mr. President. This is my third participation to the Southeast Europe Energy Outlook, dealing mainly with energy efficiency and cogeneration. During my third involvement, we had energy poverty. So, in this very short presentation, I will try to interlink, as I call it, the interlink triad: energy efficiency, high efficiency cogeneration, and energy poverty. Let's start with the first pillar, energy efficiency. What I'm saying here is covering almost all the countries in Southeast Europe, because either members of European Union or not, all of them, they're implementing the directives, and they're working on energy efficiency mainly in the building sector, and more specifically on the one that it is regarding municipalities and government buildings. So, the motto of the European Union, energy efficiency first, is something that is already exists in the Southeast Europe countries. It is, as we know, for energy efficiency is the first fuel, the most cost-effective source of energy security. So, what we are shown in the text is that despite the progress, a massive efficiency gap persists, especially in the building stock. So, this isn't just about insulation or efficient, let's say, appliances like boilers or new air conditioning systems. It's about treating saved energy as a strategic national resource. And now it's coming the one about energy security. That we have to, it is difficult to persuade, even though they do have the legal, let's say, status on energy efficiency, to persuade the users that every unit of energy not needed is a unit do not have to be imported, generated, subsidized. And this is the problem that we have in the region. Let's go to the second pillar, high efficiency combined heat and power. This, back in 2004, we had the directive specialized on high efficiency cogeneration. That became an appendix in the directive back in 2012 regarding energy efficiency in the recast and the recast of the recast, which is going to come in it came in 2023 and it's going to become probably this year part of the Greek energy legal system. What we have here in the directive, they are talking about the district heating. In the area of Southeast Europe, we do have district heating. The majority of them, they are old, they are not so efficient, and we have the tendency, especially in areas like Bosnia, like Slovenia, Croatia, and so on, Bulgaria, so on, people to cut off from district heating and going back to their own heating system. So we have a problem here. Also, we have industrial cogeneration, very strong in Romania, very strong in Bulgaria, and in Croatia, and of course in Greece. And then district cooling. This is zero. There is nothing. There is nothing in Greece, in Southeast Europe. It is in all directives, but no effort, even on the legal part, to promote district cooling. And we know, of course, that high efficiency combined heat and power and cooling optimizes supply. So this is the critical bridge to the third and most human pillar. The third pillar is energy poverty, the social imperative. So the outlook data indicates that households spending over 10 to 15% of their income on energy are not just statistics. They are forced to choose between heating, and I'm talking about heating because in the area the heating season is severe, and other essentials. I don't want to be melodramatic, but they have to choose if they're going to have heating or their medicine for old people, or even food. And this is something we have seen it in the area. It's a social and a political risk that can undermine the entire energy transition. So, we dedicate one chapter in the Outlook on energy poverty, and as the President said, that we're going to have we're going to work in the coming years on this important issue. So, let's see the connecting of the triad. 3 chapters in the Outlook. This is the virtuous cycle. Step 1, deeply renovating the buildings. This reduces the total heat and power they need. Step 2, supply those reduced demand with high efficiency cogeneration, minimize waste and system cost. Third one, the result, lower bill and more stable prices. This directly alleviates energy poverty and increases public acceptance of energy policies. So, we believe that the introduction and transposition of the Energy Efficiency Directive, that the so-called 2023-1791, which is the third recast of the initial one, is going to have a multiple positive effects in all the area. So, concluding, as they noticed before, energy efficiency in general is important. We've seen in the area a lot of IFIs and the European Union funds working in the area of energy efficiency, especially in the building sector. So this is something important. Of course, we need quite a lot of work, and in order to persuade not only the people, but also those that they're taking the decisions, that we have to fight energy poverty. A resilient system that can be built is less wasteful, more comparative, and more equitable. So, thank you very much, and please don't forget energy efficiency first. Thank you.
Thank you, Kostas, for a very clear presentation, a very well-worded message. And of course, you described the tremendous role and impact that energy efficiency could play in the years ahead. And to explain more on this and other issues, I now call George Giannakidis. George Giannakidis is an energy modeler. We have worked with his team for a number of years, and the work he's doing is of vital importance because it allows to consolidate data and make some look ahead in a very organized and disciplined way. And George, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon from my side as well. So this is actually the second outlook to which we're contributing through energy modeling. And in the previous one, we just tried to combine published scenarios from the different countries into coherent outlooks. In this outlook, we've actually used our own projection system, our own modeling system. So I'll try to have an overview of the methodology that we have used, the basic input assumptions and scenarios that we have formulated, and then some key insights from the projections. You can find a lot of details in the book that has been published. So here I just try to focus on the main outcome. And Moving on, what we're using in this analysis is what we call the Kinesis Plus modeling framework. So this is a modeling framework that is based on the TIMES energy system model generator. TIMES is being developed by the IEA ETSAP Technology Collaboration Program. So it's basically a bottom-up least cost optimization system. So in this specific framework, we are using a global multi-regional system model. And you can see here on the left the regions of the world that we're using. And as we focus more into the specific region that we're interested, we have country-level models for all the countries that we're analyzing in more detail. And that's why we have the possibility to present the results in the outlook on the country level, but here I'll talk on a regional level to see the key insights there. The advantage of such a framework is that it can be used to explore possible energy futures based on constructed scenarios. So this is not an oracle, we're not foreseeing the future, we're just trying to see possible futures based on our input and the assumptions that we're using on a framework that is the same and is consistent. So we are representing the energy system for each one of these regions, so for each one of these countries, using an explicit technology level representation. We're using 1,000 technologies overall. We are representing power plants at a plant level above the capacity of 50 megawatts, so we're quite detailed regarding the electricity representation of the area. We do use information about gas pipelines and electricity interconnectors, and we do offer the possibility of expanding this based on the least cost optimization that we're using. We use information about the renewable energy potential from the World Bank on a country level, and we do have all the detailed energy demand using energy services in the different sectors. So the idea of this model is that it projects the needs for energy services, and then based on the technology mix and the fuel mix, chooses the least cost mixture in order to satisfy this energy service. So in a way, it is the decision of a rational planner of how the system should be developed in the future. It's a perfect competition in the market in a way. So using this framework, we developed 3 scenario narratives. The first one is what we call with existing measures. So we are following the same approach as the national energy and climate plans of the countries. So here we are basically using as a cap, the CO2 trajectory that is included in the WEM scenarios of the countries. So this drives the development of the energy system overall in these countries. So we are following what has been published at the country level through their NECPs and the submissions to the UNFCCC. The second pathway, the second narrative, we call it the additional measure scenario. So here we are basically using the enhanced efforts that have been published again in the same policy papers by these countries in order to have the additional measures regarding the emissions, and this drives again a different pathway for the development of the energy system. And then the last one is what we call the net zero pathway, which builds upon the previous pathways, but we also have a global net zero cap for the emissions of the countries that we're representing. So we try basically to see what would mean for the energy system of the countries if a net zero target was to be imposed. So this in a way gives us a range of possible developments from a current business as usual development to a really aggressive net zero by 2050 development of the energy system. Our time horizon is until 2050 overall. And just to give you a key insight of how things look like. So this is the primary energy supply. That's the local production plus imports minus exports. And as was mentioned, we tried to separate these into 3 blocks. We have the Western Balkan 6 countries, the EU members, and Turkey. So that's just to give you a level of difference between the countries that we're talking about. And that's why each one of these blocks, they have a very different both policy but also as setups of the energy system, and we need to look at them separately. So if we zoom into the Western Balkan 6 countries, what we see is what has already been mentioned. Coal is quite important at the level of the primary energy supply here. And we do see that with existing measures, this remains such. So coal still remains an important part. The additional measures are actually gradually reducing the contribution of coal, so until 2040, and then they sort of minimize it towards 2050. So that includes the emission reduction that has already been published in a way from these countries. And we do see gas to come here as a transitional fuel, which is basically having a stronger role through the years. We do see a difference regarding the oil products and crude oil, whose contribution is being reduced compared to the WEM, and the contribution of renewables, solar and wind. And of course, the net zero scenario is the one that is pushing even more for total disappearance of coal by 2050, and quite a large introduction of biomass, which is the green part here at the bottom, and of course solar, wind as other renewables. So this is basically pushing overall the penetration of renewables in the area. And what we do see is that actually the area becomes a net exporter at the end, which means that the utilization of their own energy, renewable energy, could actually give them the possibility to export in this extreme net zero scenario. Now, if we look at the EU member states in the southeastern Europe, the current situation is basically what we see here in the left. So oil and oil products do play an important role overall, and then we have gas over here, and coal is still there, and it remains as an option in the WEM scenario. But then in the additional measure scenario, its contribution is even less, and of course in the net zero scenario, it sort of disappears already by 2040. The same holds for oil products overall, so a very rapid reduction here. And what we do see is the development of renewable energy overall in the net zero scenario, with a large contribution of wind and solar, and of course a certain contribution of biomass and biofuels as well, that we can see at the bottom right over here. Then Turkey is a case on its own. It's completely different from all the other countries that we have seen. We do see a very strong development of the demand, which is contrasted to what we see in the countries of the EU in the area, and that's connected with the overall increased economic activity and industrial activity in the country. In the WEM scenario, coal and gas take up the lion's share of the primary energy supply, and this continues to be the case in the WAM scenario, with coal reduced and gas taking up the extra area that is left. And what we do see here in Turkey is basically nuclear. So nuclear does appear as an option. I mean, it's already appearing by 2030 with the current plants, but at least in the WAM and net zero, it does seem to be an important option overall. And then the contribution of wind and solar as renewables is increasing quite a lot in the net zero scenario. And what we do see as well is the fact that hydrogen appears in a significant amount in the net zero scenario, pushing quite a lot the need to decarbonize the large industry that the country has. Looking at the final energy consumption, so now on the other side of the energy, of the reference energy system, what we do see is again a huge difference. And then looking into the Western Balkan 6 countries, we do see a reduction of the total final energy consumption. So energy efficiency is being pushed there due to the environmental restrictions that are being pushed. And the other key component that we see is actually electrification. So these yellow bars here represent electricity, and you do see that the significant increase of electricity in the final energy consumption, renewable electricity, as we will see later on. The other important difference is basically the oil products. So the thing at the top, the brown at the top, is basically oil products, mainly for transportation and industrial installations. And this is reduced in the case of WAM, and even more reduced in the case of the net zero emissions. So looking at the EU member states here, we do see that electrification is key overall, we see that gas is a transitional fuel, but then if we want to net zero, the amount will be considerably reduced towards 2050 overall. We do see biomass and biofuels playing an important role almost in all scenarios. And of course, coal consumption at the final energy consumption is basically vanished even in the WAM and in the net zero scenario as well. The part over here at the top is basically hydrogen. So this is hydrogen that appears into the industrial uses, and we do see that even under the WAM scenario at the end, smaller quantities overall. So it's basically something that shows that at least there is the potential. So now if it's going to be applied at the end, it's something that we will see. And then, yeah, Turkey, we do see that between WAM and WAM, there doesn't seem to be a lot of energy efficiency. There's a lot of demand to be covered by but the net zero is actually pushing efficiency options to come into quite significantly towards 2050. And that leads also to a completely change in the share of the different energy forms with a large penetration of electricity, and then gas being there, relatively reduced compared to the other scenarios of existing measures and additional measures. And as I mentioned before, this is hydrogen over there, which is pushed significantly in the industrial sector for 2050 when we're talking about net zero emissions. And then, of course, coal is following the same trajectory as we've seen before in all the other countries. So we talked about electrification, so a lot of electricity being consumed in all these countries. So where is this electricity coming from? This is the Western Balkan 6 countries. So what we do see here is that coal and lignite is basically covering a large part of electricity production in the WEM scenario, but towards 2040, renewables, so solar and wind, do come a lot in the mixture because of the possibility of the reduction of the prices that we are projecting as that become quite significant towards 2040, and because of the potential of the region overall, and the overall need for electricity through the electrification that we have seen in the final energy consumption. In the WAM scenario, the contribution of coal is basically vanished by 2050, being replaced mainly by, well, hydro, solar, and wind. And the same holds in the case of the net zero, but here we do see that the contribution, the actual generation from renewables is much higher because the need for electricity is much higher at the final energy consumption, so electrification is higher overall. Similar pattern in the case of the EU member states in Southeastern Europe, and here we do see a differentiation with a high contribution of offshore and onshore wind as well, because of the existing potential overall in the region, the contribution of solar PV, which is continuously increasing, and the contribution of nuclear, which is basically stabilized. We are not allowing any new nuclear apart from what is already announced in these countries, because at least at the EU member states, nuclear is a very political issue, so we don't want to let the optimization decide, but we use whatever has been announced in the area overall. And then similar outlook for Turkey. In the case of WEM, it's basically coal that is coming up quite a lot together with gas. In the case of WAM, coal is much less, and then gas is taking up a significant part. Nuclear is expanded quite a lot, and then we have solar and wind. And then in the net zero, solar, offshore wind, and onshore wind contribute considerably together with the possibility of expanding nuclear and gas, which is basically turned into gas with CCS to make sure that at least emissions are limited. So that's very briefly the presentation of what we come up with in the analysis of the scenarios. So the key insights that we can get is that, at least from the point of view of the EU member states, the WEM scenario does have a steady decline of coal and oil, but not an aggressive one. Gas is acting as a transitional fuel. Renewables are expanding under current conditions anyway, and this leads to a progressive decarbonization of electricity with a resulting reduction of import dependency combined with some basic efficiency gains. Now, WAM has a more accelerated phase out of coal and faster renewable development overall, stronger electrification on the demand side, and efficiency improvements leading to a reduction of the final energy consumption and a stabilization overall despite the economic growth of the region. And then significant reduction of the CO2 emissions with a decoupling between emissions and growth. And then the net zero, we're talking about a complete elimination of coal by 2050, renewables exceeding 90% in order to achieve the net zero target, completely decarbonized power sector, and then a considerable reduction of import dependency. The Western Balkan 6 countries do have a persistent reliance on coal and oil products in the WEM scenario. They continue to do what they've been doing so far, but the increase of the energy demand with economic development remained high. It's only slightly decoupled compared to the GDP growth rate, significant import dependency in the region, but when we move into the WAM, we do have a considerable reduction in coal use, faster penetration of renewables, and of course a reduction of emission intensities and corresponding improvement of import dependencies. And the net zero is a transitional shift overall, coal fully phased out, electricity sector fully decarbonized, and then a significant fall of import dependency. And looking into Turkey, WEM is guided by the strong increase of the final energy consumption due to the population, urbanization, and the overall industrial expansion, which drives the GDP growth, with the dominance of fossil fuels in the mix and a continuous increase on the emissions. The WAM starts offering a visible diversification of the energy mix, with renewables expanding even more, and the power sector emissions decline due to this, but still industry and transport are heavily fossil fuel based. And then in the net zero, we have a near complete decarbonization of the power sector and high share of renewables in the final energy consumption as well. CCS is emerging here, plus hydrogen, to keep up with the demand to have a net zero system, and a considerable drop of import dependency overall. However, hydrogen seems to be an imported commodity in the area, in the region, so there seems to be quite an interplay regarding hydrogen overall in the countries and also globally, because this is a global model, so we try to capture global trade as well. So with this, I would just like to thank you and give the floor over to Mr. Staboulis. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Really impressive the way that you have worked out the different scenarios, very clear. And now we move on to contribution by Alexander Kovacevic, who is in Belgrade. Alexander is a well-known energy economist in the region. He has worked with the Oxford Energy Institute. We know each other a number of years, and this time he has undertaken the natural gas part of the outlook. So Alexander, welcome, and we look forward to your input.
Okay. Thank you, Kostas. That's really great pleasure working again together. And I have to congratulate on a very, very comprehensive publication, actually, which is probably missed in the region for quite some period of time. And seems to me quite a good moment, as the governments need to make serious decisions and need to navigate in extremely difficult geopolitical situation. So this kind of publication actually helps, and that's I think is quite important. I wrote the chapter about natural gas. It's interesting that more or less all other speakers been in one or another way considering natural gas. I have to say, in a similar fashion as US Secretary of Energy, that natural gas is, or gas altogether, is not on just simple transition fuel. It's here to stay, and it will stay for a period, probably in a different role, in a different fashion, probably in a different origins than it is today, but it is important component of the energy security and commercial energy architecture. So I would like also to go through a couple of anecdotes which actually happened over a period of a year. One is just going along the highway between Belgrade and Budapest. There is a private company delivering LNG for transportation, for big heavy trailers transporting between the Europe and Southeast Europe, Turkey, Greece, etc. They are buying LNG and transporting by trucks from Rotterdam. There are other commercial players which are buying LNG and importing from Barcelona. I think that this is a very important message for all the players in the field who are considering pipeline gas, regas terminals, and the big infrastructure. LNG delivered to the customer is a golden standard of the market of the future. We, in Southeast Europe, we have a number of corridors. We like talking about corridors, and the governments spend a lot of time about transit corridors. I tried to summarize the story about corridors in the paper. So this is figure 21, which is over there in the paper. And you can see here what is happening and how this interacts. Serbia is an interesting point here. Serbia has, at this moment, nearly 20 times more transit capacity than its domestic gas consumption. Seems fantastic, even for any other region in Europe. To make things more fantastic, the utilization rate of this transit capacity is really minimal. So this is where we actually stand. There is now discussion about this pale blue corridor to deliver gas to Ukraine. There are other discussions how to deliver gas to Ukraine from Baltic Sea, from Kirk terminal, from Alexandroupolis terminal, etc., etc. So everything of that is way too expensive in comparison with various forms to deliver LNG. To make things more interesting, LNG is competitive versus crude oil in this region. This region is supplied with oil products in very expensive way. Small refineries, lack of competitiveness, long transportation routes, relatively low utilization of the ports and terminals, etc. So, and then if we take a look how big is gas in transportation, it's really minimal, with a couple of exceptions. So, use of gas is one side, political ambitions, completely different side, and political ambitions driven by players out of this region with completely different geopolitical interests. This is where we stand. So if we try to somehow, clean this fog and look at really what happens in the region, the picture is far easier and far more commercial. There is a potentially domestic market, which could be quite interesting, but it is very different than what is actually happening today. So transport is one thing, some of the industries is another, agriculture is another. We don't see gas doing any bigger role over there. Similar stories about corridors. Kostis mentioned there is a big mystery about Danube. Danube is a natural transportation corridor, which is practically unused. Danube Convention, signed in 1948, fairly obsolete when it comes to transportation efficiency. Russian Federation is not part of the convention anymore, which is a big geopolitical earthquake, I have to say, but still have to come into effect through the eventual changes of Danube Convention, allowing other shipping companies from non-coastal countries to enter into Danube and to open this market for trade. So if that happens, we may see completely different dynamics about fertilizers, natural gas, ammonia, etc., etc. So this is another interesting issue. So the logic of the geography. So Danube, Dnieper, Volga-Don system, Black Sea, Aegean, and Adriatic Sea. So we still have to see more movement of cargoes along these waterways, and far better integration between inland and waterborne gas markets. So at this moment, unfortunately, and if we are looking into these LNG terminals, which do exist, we see that these terminals are somehow restricting trade. So regulation about these terminals is impediment for further development. So that's something which needs to be taken into consideration. Nevertheless, between existing 8 terminals around, we see another 6 in various stages of planning. We see more ambition. We see more than 15 terminals in a political ambition. So there are many ideas, projects, etc. And here is another anecdote. It happened at the beginning of April 2025 during a ministerial conference in Baku on Southern Corridor. There was no visible, well-declared interest of European Union to actually go into long-term agreement for gas supply. Sounds surprising, but actually it's not. This is a situation about long-term contracts we are looking for quite some years. Obviously, without long-term commitment, it's very difficult to plan and build infrastructure. There is another issue which is purely about economics and geography. Our region, Southeast Europe, is very low density of economic activity. It's a low density of population, much lower than the rest of Europe, but it's also very low when it comes to economic activity. It's very difficult to consider how expensive, heavy infrastructure pipelines, how that may actually grow further in this region. So first and foremost, The question is to use existing infrastructure. And we see very little about that in the national planning, in national energy and climate plans, national energy strategies, etc., etc. So very little about better use of existing infrastructure. And here it comes to a third anecdote. Just a couple of weeks ago, the oil pipeline, which was built between Port of Thessaloniki in Greece and capital city Skopje in northern Macedonia, is converted into oil product pipeline. This is the first conversion happen in this region. And this is a signal that we can see more of that. So there are oil pipelines elsewhere, in Croatia, for example, with very, very low utilization rate, which are very suitable to transport oil products or natural gas eventually. So we may see an interesting ideas about repurposing infrastructure and then considering this in completely different, let's say, landscape afterwards. So even this small change between Greece and North Macedonia already makes a big change in commercial interests, in commercial thinking all across the region. I was talking yesterday about with a couple of people from commercial players, and that takes an attention. So it's quite an interesting how quickly this change is making an impact. So let's go through a couple of highlights from the studies. We have, as I said, a big ambitions about transit. And we have complete disconnect between commercial reality on the ground and national energy and climate planning. So what happens between commercial players and what governments envisage are increasingly different. We have a problem with liquidity of the markets, liquidity of the financial markets. We have very high weighted average cost of capital in the region. So planning investment is not easy. If it becomes easy, it's a matter of concern. There is some geopolitical interest behind that, which may or may not be positive for countries which are in question. So we see as we speak, it's happening right now. Discussions of some projects in Arab Emirates, in Russia, and elsewhere. We see natural gas as a heat-only boiler in boilers in district heat. This is dominant use of natural gas. A colleague was talking about energy efficiency, about cogeneration, etc. Unfortunately, we are far from there. And yes, natural gas may play a completely different role in this context. There is a question about hydropower. So Western Balkan is a significant hydropower resource of European significance. So if we recall a little bit of history, so the first project in the Marshall Plan for Europe, 1947, was Yugoslavia Hydropower for Europe, called UGEL at that time. So this was a massive project to stabilize European electricity grid. Based on that, UCTE, European Interconnection, has been formed in 1956. It's still the problem. And problem is even bigger today because of intermittent renewable energy. So it's extremely important that hydropower from the Balkans becomes commercially available to the European market. Unfortunately, if it is constrained by security of supply with natural gas for district heating or eventually power generation, that may not be the case. So this have to be serious matter of concern for anybody in Europe thinking about security of supply, about security and stability of the grid in Europe, in Ukraine, which immediately reflects on safety and security of nuclear power plants in Ukraine, as John was talking a little bit ago. So, enormously important question, and have to be taken into consideration. Therefore, yes, gas may play the role, but no, we don't want gas to play that role in the Western Balkans. So we have to be very careful what are the consequences of different strategic arrangements. Therefore, imported gas to Western Balkans is not a viable replacement for lignite. We have to look to something else. And colleagues have been talking just before about geothermal energy, biomass, energy efficiency, cogeneration. Yes, these are important words, and gas may play the role over there, but a different role, not a role it is playing today. Of course, we can take a look of biomethane. We can take a look about carbon capture and utilization, carbon capture and storage. So low carbon gas could be a very interesting context for the future use of gas. If this strategic issue is properly solved, then gas is actually here to stay. So that is how much I wanted to say. In very simple, we have a big, important book. Take the time, read the book. I think it's quite an interesting and useful contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander, very much for this most useful contribution. And from your vantage point, you have very, very important things to say, and which, I mean, you can view this situation much clearer from your point of view, from your location there. So thanks again, and for your contribution to the study. Now we'll make a small change of plans. I'd like to call Spyros Kiartzis to take the floor. He is the manager of new technologies and alternative energy at Hellenic Energy. Hellenic Energy is the lead sponsor of this study. And I'd like to ask Spyros to take the floor now, as he has a previous engagement. So Spyros, please.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to thank my good friend, Mr. Kostas Tabolis, and the whole team in INE that for decades now, not for many years, but for decades, we are working together. First of all, we are, as Hellenic Petroleum, very proud to sponsor this significant initiative. As you can see, this one, it has value. It has value in weight, at least, but it has value, extra value in what it includes as a knowledge and as all these nice things. Don't forget that energy flows goes hand to hand with geopolitics, with market-related issues, and don't forget, one of the most interesting books I've read recently was the one from Tim Marshall, The Power of Geography, and we are prisoners of geography, number 2. This very nice book said that we are now in this area, the southeastern part of Europe, and we have to deal with common projects, common interests, and common geopolitics. What is the current status? We have financial and investment challenges. We have to adapt to realism. Geopolitical and technological conditions are changing, and what we had until today, we had, let's say it, an impulsive energy transition approach. And whole Europe in this area, but we have now to follow a realpolitik, as it was said in the beginning of the previous century, in energy. Well, in the policy we had followed until now, we have ignored consequences in industry and in the cost that is directly reflected to citizens. And we also have to take into account energy security. Well, energy security is a major parameter. We need regional cooperation. We have to increase our cross-border activities. We have to rethink the supply chains because today globalization is in doubt. We have to look in what we can do in our neighborhood. And we have to stand in our own feet. We have competition with USA, we have competition with China, with the global south. Here in Europe, and especially in this part of Europe, we have to follow our strengths and find solutions. Well, we are talking about energy transition. We have to burn money. We have to invest on this. Based on recent studies, we need 1 trillion euros per year of investments for the green transition in order to succeed in EU. Do you know how much do we spend? Half of it. Almost half a trillion instead of 50% below. Well, that's significant, let's say, discrepancy in order to be more polite on this. Anyway, we have the new reality. The supply of natural gas from pipelines is now replaced from LNG, and FSRUs are becoming even more significant, and generally LNG terminals. And unfortunately, we have limited grid connections, problems with infrastructure, electricity infrastructures, in an environment that renewable energy is, let's say, exhausted because it cannot be easily transported. What we are doing as Hellenic Energy, apart from being proud for sponsoring this nice book and this study that really make us more wise, well, we have completed the vision of 2025, trying to include all the things that are said here, all the commitments we have in European Union, and all our national targets. It was mentioned from the previous one, who talked about gas, the Vardax pipeline. By the end of 2025, we are proud to have, instead of crude, that was the previous usage of this pipeline, now diesel being in this pipeline to directly connect Thessaloniki refinery with the terminal we have in Skopje. So we have all these nice upstream activities with ExxonMobil, with Chevron, and we are trying to find out hydrocarbons in this area. Well, we have established a very nice trading company in it's Hellenic Petroleum Trading in Geneva, in Switzerland. We buy out in the Enerwave, the former Elpedison, and now we are having 100% of the shares of this company. developing a green hub north and green hub south with the main hubs in our industrial complexes, the refinery in Thessaloniki in the north, and combined with renewables, and the green hub south in the two refineries we have in Aspropyrgos and Elefsina, having almost 1 gigawatt of renewables in operation and targeting to almost 2 gigawatts soon in the next years, and having these renewables in 5 countries in southeastern Europe. Of course, offshore wind and FSRU are also in our plans, and we are examining these investments. Well, this is how we create value, how we promote energy safety, and how we invest in low-carbon economy, having an EBITDA of more than 1 billion for 4 consecutive years. Well, what we learned here, we learned that we have increased cost and that decarbonization really costs. We have learned that energy security is crucial. We have learned that gas is a strategic fuel and not only a transition fuel. We have to mitigate problems in energy supply and enhance our energy infrastructure. We had some impacts from the target model, as it was mentioned in the market, and that increased somehow market costs or had some troubles. We have a significant nuclear energy contribution in the area if we exclude Turkey, that goes up to 16%. And that SMRs are taken into account. We need almost 1 trillion investments. It was 800 billions of investments for interconnection in this area. But we have also to face renewable energy curtailments. Believe me, that's a very, very horrible story, and that pains a lot. And check for green hydrogen and carbon capturing. But of course, diversification, interconnectivity, and infrastructure resilience were what is crucial. And by the end of the day, geography is nice, geopolitics is nice, but all of this have to be in a course that we can manipulate, but at the end of the day, it's energy security. And as we are talking for energy security, we as a company, the very, very first month after the Russian invasion in Ukraine, we stopped all imports from Russian crude. And in the very next months, we decreased rapidly all the imports in Russian gas. As saying so, I have to consider the big picture, which is in the area, and say, okay, energy security. What we are doing, we want to phase out Russian hydrocarbons. That's great. We did it. But there is a huge but. What we are doing, we need batteries, we need photovoltaics, we need wind turbines, we need electric vehicles. And which country is producing all this? And we are all importing from this country, China. So, when we are talking, and we are talking also for some materials that are crucial for this, and you will see that, unfortunately, the majority of these materials are also produced in China. So when we are saying that we have to face energy security, we should also face this problem. And I think I have to close. I was really impressed from Turkey as a country because Turkey develops, expands industrial production, and has strong economic growth that goes with population growth and so on. Why? The reason is one: cheap energy. That's very crucial. And now we work towards a better future. And we have to provide solutions. But let me give you a few questions as a closing remark. How can we have renewables without sufficient grid? How can we have investments without curtailments? How can we have green hydrogen without renewables, which is a prerequisite? How can we have stability without base units? How can we have energy security without local energy sources? How can we have regional cooperation without enough interconnections? How can we have digitalization without cybersecurity, which is also a crucial issue? And at the end of the day, how can we have prosperity in this area, in Europe, without cheap energy? Thank you.
Thank you, Spiros, for bringing up the issue of energy affordability, because this is what you really refer to, which is very important. And I think the presentation by Spiros Kerdis was equally important because it comes from a company which is actually very active in a very competitive field, which is energy. And from this point, I'd like to thank once again Hellenic Energy. We have been working many years together. We know many people, but the continuing support is a vote of confidence for the Institute, and we're grateful. Now we're coming to the end of our session, and we're going to cover oil, petroleum. And we have one presentation on the downstream issue and another one on upstream. And with these two presentations, we conclude, and through them, you have a very global picture of what's happening in energy in the area. So Nikos Liapis, who is the chairman of the downstream committee of ENA, one of the very few groups in Greece who are concerned with the downstream issues, but which is a very important issue, as you see. Demand and consumption of oil is going up, it's not going down. So Nikos, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Kostis. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As concluding, yes, coming from the oil industry for many years now, I would say that first of all, it was my first time to contribute in the ENA Southeast Europe Energy Outlook, and it was a very good experience seeing where have we gone the last few years with oil, mainly in the oil sector, or the liquid fuel sector, I would say best, and what will be the prospects for the future. So usually, as we've seen in this specific event, energy discussions usually gravitate towards electricity, grid renewables, and the prospect and the promise for the green hydrogen that will solve many of our problems with energy. But if we want to describe mainly the reality and not the aspiration, we must acknowledge that we have a simple truth, that the liquid fuels remain the backbone of many of industrial and everyday activities like mobility, logistics, and large parts of the industry. And this is a big reality, especially in Southeast European countries, something that happens globally and, of course, in Europe, across Europe as well, but it happens, it is a big reality, and we'll see later on why this has happened in Southeastern European countries. Because liquid fuels shape trade balances, energy security, they adjust the household costs, the inflation dynamics, and in general, the competitiveness in all sectors, especially in the energy sector. And especially in Southeastern European countries, because of the geography, the income levels, the infrastructure gaps that we have, and the industrial structure, the liquid fuels are a real strategic topic. So, going to see a little bit about the global oil demand and supply in order to proceed to our region secondary, would say that worldwide we expect that oil demand is going to increase but it will slow down progressively. Because we have seen a rebound in global oil demand after the pandemic, and at the same time, we have a new reality in natural gas and renewable electricity generation that they play now a key role in wider energy transition policies. So we could say that the road fuel demand is expected to be approaching its peak. We have, as a matter of fact, the only energy sector in Europe in general that is growing is the transport fuels, because of the change in manufacturing origin and the consumption origin. But it will have to meet a peak because we have this invasion of electric vehicles and teleworking, and so the total demand is expected to decrease, but 0.8 million barrels per day by 2030. So we'll have a peak and then we'll have a decline. So a big part on that will play in liquid fuel consumption, because at the moment is the biggest part of this consumption in this big industry, in the shipping industry, is the marine fuels, which is mainly the marine bunkers and the domestic navigation as well. And the demand there is expected to hover around 5.3 million barrels per day for the next period. And this has to do with the very small growth in global trade. That is the main driver for marine fuel consumption, and the seaborne freight, along with the tighter standards that are imposed by the IMO and the European Union as well about the carbon intensity of shipping. So we've seen a big decline in carbon intensity, not in the total consumption in marine fuels, but especially in carbon intensity. But another driver that we don't consider a lot when we're talking about oil is that it's not only the energy consumption, but it's also the petrochemical feedstocks that come from oil. And as the plastic consumption and the production, manufacturing is going up and up year by year, this drives to a rising demand for petrochemical feedstock, and this will be the largest force for growth in oil demand during the projection of the time period. I mean, not for the total consumption, but for the growth. So if we see the projection in 2023 up to 2030, we have a gain of 2.8 million barrels per day. This could be equivalent to about the 3/4 of the total increase in oil consumption coming from the petrochemical feedstock. And of course, China is the main consumer of that by far. It's the most important region for the higher petrochemical activity. So we have a feedstock use that is predicted to go up by 1.3 million barrels per day between 2023 and 2030, having risen by 2.6 million barrels per day from 2017 to 2023. So we have a big growth. And if we see here the oil demand, with the petrochemical feedstock is the dark blue. So we see that we have all the other oil products and consumption from demand from oil. We have the biofuels that are rising, but are going a little bit steady, but the petrochemicals really drive the increase in demand. So for the production, of course, we have another presentation about the upstream. I won't talk a lot about that, but we'll see that Southeastern European countries have a very limited domestic oil reserves and mainly oil production in that. So their dependence on crude oil is heavily from imports. Only 11% of the oil refined in Southeastern Europe originate from oil fields in the origin, and this happens mainly to two countries, of course. And this dependence of imports is the result of depletion of existing oil with few opportunities for new extractions. So we've seen that in Greece, that we have a lot of opportunities and exploration that at the moment have not led to any new fields for real exploration exploitation. So some countries have some significant reserves in shale rock gas. Of course, we know that in Greece, by law at the moment, we cannot exploit fields like that, but the technology is not there. The business case to exploit these fields is not there, so we don't have any, we don't expect any demand. So we can see that what we see until now and what we will expect in the near future, that we have a strong dependency on oil import for all the southeastern European countries. You see that most of them are on 100% dependent on oil imports, apart from mainly Romania that has some oil fields, Albania, etc. Most of them are heavily dependent on imports, as the production of crude oil in southeastern Europe is really very low. And what is the products that we use mainly from oil products? We can see that, first of all, it's quite interesting to see what is the share of oil and petroleum products in the energy consumption, to understand why liquid fuels are significant for our area, and for the last part of my presentation, why biofuels and renewable fuels, liquid renewable fuels, are also important for the production. So we have in our area, 44.3% is the average of the share of oil and petroleum products in the energy consumption. But some countries like Greece are really more, let's say, dependent on these liquid fuels products. Slovenia is number one with 57%, followed by Cyprus, North Macedonia, and Greece. Greece is still dependent 54% from oil products. So it's a huge part of that, of the energy consumption. And from the other hand, when we go to see the other point, it's Hungary relies only by 33%, and Serbia, Turkey, and Bosnia and Herzegovina are very low due to their dependence on and the consumption mostly of natural gas and electricity. So Greece is still heavily dependent on liquid fuels, and the liquid fuels that are most widely consumed in our region is gas oil and diesel oil. These distillates are the most widely consumed because we still are dependent a lot from road transport, and diesel and gas oil is the road transport fuel and also the marine, one of the marine fuels for the short sea shipping, as a matter of fact. So we have a decreased consumption in these petroleum products after the economic crisis, and then we had, of course, the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, and also the energy crisis. So we have a decrease in the period from 2020 up to 2022, but then we see a slightly increase. But due to, especially to European Union countries, due to the biofuels expansion, we see that we have a prospect that is not to see a big raise on that. And we'll talk a little bit about the other part of liquid fuel, which is biofuels. Biofuels at the moment, renewable fuels in the near future, we could say, synthetic or from other origin, from recycled carbon, for example. And we see that we have a huge difference between 2023, where the global biofuel production reached 960,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day. When we compare that with the 12,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day that were produced back in the 2000. So we have a big growth, but this growth was not accidental. It was due to largely driven by policies that encourage the use and production of biofuels, due to the perception that it could provide energy security for European Union especially, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in relevant sectors. Of course, with a lot of problems, and we have now a steady production of biofuels, or first generation biofuels, due to mainly to problems with other sectors like agriculture and food industry and sustainability issues. So we have three scenarios here. I mean, we have the historical data, a main scenario, an accelerated case for 2016 up to 2028, and we'll see that the driver with the light blue is the biodiesel main part, which is the main production and consumption in Europe and in South Europe as well. So then we have the biogasoline blend, mainly apart from ethanol that is mainly imported, but we have the production here of ethers, ETBE, as a matter of fact, that is a component for gasoline, and biogas that is coming more and more as a prospect for the future, especially for the making greener the natural gas. So for the production of liquid biofuels, we would say that in Southeast Europe we have a primary production that has a number of products, mainly biodiesel, but also, as we said, biogasoline, some biojet kerosene, and of course other liquid biofuels, and biogas, as a matter of fact, as a fuel as well, mainly in Bulgaria, in Greece, in Romania, and Turkey. Bulgaria, as a matter of fact, is the number one in biofuels production, especially biodiesel, producing around 260 kilotons, followed by Romania and Greece with 160 kilotons, Turkey later on with 156. A strange thing here is that Greece has a very big capacity, it has the biggest capacity in production of biofuels, but it's a spare capacity. I mean, many of the companies that are producing targeted to exports of biodiesel, even if we don't have the feedstock here, most of the feedstock is imported. But for a strange reason, the producers decided that they should extend their capacity. It has to do, of course, from one hand with the quota system as well, that, let's say, gives some bonus for the capacity of the biodiesel plants, but we have this spare capacity without main production, and Bulgaria is the champion, let's say, in this production. So the future of biofuels, we have a strong prospect, not to the first generation biofuels, of course, but this is something that is a reality, this is business as usual at the moment, but we think that it's not just a checkbox obligation, as a matter of fact. So we are moving into the new era that we have advanced biofuels, waste-based feedstocks, and keep that in mind just for the final conclusion, renewable synthetic components that we have coming from green hydrogen and carbon that is captured from other activities, and we will stick to strict sustainability criteria that this will shape the availability and pricing of the new kind of biofuels and liquid renewable fuels, as we could say best. So the market is going from a regime that is a volume blending regime to a new concept that has to do about quality, about carbon, and about compliance, and this will be the drivers for the production and consumption of these new renewable liquid fuels. So we could say, to conclude, that the low carbon fuels will be a critical point for Southeast Europe. We saw that most of the countries, or many of the countries, are heavily dependent on diesel or in general liquid fuels for their energy consumption. So we can use low carbon fuels when we have it, when we have the availability, as a transition accelerator, because they can work exactly within the existing liquid fuels infrastructure. So we don't need to change the infrastructure, we don't need to change the engines. So we need very low investment on that. And for Southeastern Europe, low investment is a really critical cost, as we are in the lowest part of the GDP in Europe. So they can still reduce emissions in a very efficient way in the current fleet without requiring any replacement of assets, and this is significant. So we can see in this way immediate reductions in emissions in transport and in special industrial uses that we already use liquid fuels. And it means that we have low carbon liquid fuels can play an important role. And when we talk about low carbon fuels, we must have in mind that this is not only biodiesel or first generation biodiesel, but we're talking about second generation biodiesel, second generation bioethanol, and also what we say as renewable fuels of non-biological origin, mainly synthetic fuels, or as we know now from RED III directive, the ones that we call the recycled carbon fuels that come from waste, and mainly from plastic waste or from carbon that is captured. And in this way, you must understand that in Southeastern Europe, we have the feedstock for these fuels. We don't have oil, we don't have crude oil, we cannot expand our upstream, we don't have natural gas, we are heavily dependent on import. But if we want to make RFNBOs or recycled carbon fuels, we have millions, thousands of tons and millions of tons of waste plastic that can be a very good hydrocarbon, a very good substitute fuel for especially substituting heavy fuel oil, but diesel as well. We have we're champions in renewables because of the sun and wind, etc. And we can have carbon dioxide that will be captured through CCU out of other activities, industrial activities. So we have the feedstock to develop these fuels, And these fuels do not need any other investment in infrastructure or in changing assets, engines, etc., which means that for our countries, it is one of the best solutions. We have the feedstock, and a very cheap feedstock, as a matter of fact, and we can proceed to that as long as we invest a little bit on research and mainly on the infrastructure for the production. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Nikos, for bringing us into the picture on oil and oil products. And I'm sure after the presentation, many of you will realize how big part of the market, of the energy market, is oil. Biofuels is the obvious step of succession from traditional fuels. But it's a big challenge, as Nico said, because a lot of work still needs to be done so that biofuels can be integrated into the main market. So we conclude this session by looking at the upstream sector, exploration, production, hydrocarbons, and surprisingly, a region is blessed with quite a lot of resources. Many people do not realize that, but Kostas Economopoulos will explain it.
Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I'll have the final presentation for today. It won't take long, so I won't keep you away from the drinks and food. So my name is Kostas Economopoulos. I'm a petroleum geoscientist and a research fellow for the IENE for the last couple of years. This is actually the second time I've worked on this project. Remember the first time that was published back in 2011. I also contributed to exactly the same chapter, the hydrocarbon exploration, and production. My agenda for today, I will explain how I've structured the whole chapter number 8. I will talk about the upstream industry in general, how it plays out today, seems to be the future outlook. I will then focus more on the regional things, what's happening in our area, which is also the part that this book is talking about. I will give some updates regarding the countries we've touched upon in the outlook, and I'll wrap it up with a couple of conclusions. To start off, the way I've structured this chapter, and compared to previous publications, it's a lot more concise with an introduction. Basically, the regional overview that talks about the geological background and the regional activities. Before you get too scared, there's not much geological information in the publication this time. I try to refrain myself from expanding on that, understanding that the whole lingo and everything around geology rocks, not pun intended, but not a lot of people would appreciate that. And obviously my presentation today has nothing to do with geology, regardless of my background. And this chapter goes on to the country updates, so getting in more details regarding the countries that you see up on the screen. These are the countries that have the most activities, let's say, in the region. Some of them might be in a weaker position. Some of them are as we're gonna see later on, are in a stronger position. However, they do make a good story, and you get a very good idea about what's happening in the region regarding hydrocarbon exploration and production, the upstream business. To start things off, it's been mentioned a few times today, but I'm going to repeat that as well. But the oil and gas, the anchor, the global energy at the moment, it's about 50% of the global demand. And if you add coal into that mix, then that percentage goes up to almost 87, over 85%. For the time being, the main driver of the world upstream business is the mature basins, the ones that we have in the northeast, exploited by the UK, Norway, a bit of Denmark, and then the Netherlands. And there is a shift in general from the industry towards a lower risk and infrastructure-led exploration. What I mean is companies tend to get into first of all, the mature basins that I already mentioned, but also in places where there's already infrastructure there. There's just tiebacks to already existing fields, and the use of technology can drive things forward. And that sustains near-term supply because of two reasons. First of all, it's a lower cost, so to produce the oil and the gas. Excuse me. And secondly, it's it's a quicker and an easier access to the markets. There is frontier exploration, and by frontier exploration, in case you're not familiar with that, it's places where there's no much exploration being done or hardly ever any exploration. Our country, Greece, is one of those places considered a frontier area. That being said, there is quite of activity in frontier areas, namely Suriname and Guyana. Recently, almost 11 billion barrels of oil reserves have been discovered in this region, and in elsewhere, as in Africa as well, in the Orange Basin in Namibia, where I happen to have quite a lot of experience in the previous role of mine. And I may, towards the end of the presentation, may talk about Namibia a little bit, because it's a good example of how things are properly done in the hydrocarbon exploration production chain. Recently, and especially with the change, or the energy transition, especially with the European pivot away from Russian resources, gas, namely the gas and the LNG, which is mainly coming from the US and on the eastern hemisphere from Australia and other places in that region, is the one that's shaping at the moment the energy security worldwide. Also, the industry, the upstream industry at the moment is kind of like a double face coin. On one side, you have the NOCs, which stands for National Oil Companies, like Aramco is one of them. And on the other side, you have the majors, the independent oil companies like the Exxons, the Chevrons, and all of them. Currently, the NOCs dominate the reserves in the world, with the second one, I believe it's Exxon, being way back behind. The reason for that is because the national oil companies, and these are coming mainly from areas in the Middle East and Africa and other places where the state is backing up exploration and production, for one thing. So they have the proper, well, I wouldn't say advising, but proper stewarding. Secondly, and that's very important, is the majors and the independent oil companies, they have been facing a big change due to the energy transitions and all that. They have to work within an environment where stakeholders have maybe different views and different aspirations regarding the goals the companies have to achieve. Also, they have to meet ESG criteria. The financing is differently much different than how financing is for national companies. So these are two main important things. It's an important thing currently in the world industry. The other three things that's forming up the world industry at the moment, the upstream industry, is the technology, which has allowed for for many areas that haven't had any exploration, or they couldn't have any exploration, has allowed them to go ahead with that. I mentioned before Namibia is a particularly one example. Brazil, the deep pre-salt basins of Brazil have gained a lot from the advances in technology, because it allows us to go deeper, to go safer, and to go cheaper. And last but not least, it's geopolitics, that have always played a big role in hydrocarbon exploration production, but currently it's framing up the whole market. We've got regional conflicts in the Ukraine, the Middle East, currently Venezuela had a regime change. All this totally affect the world industry. And that's that. You have the pressure to reconcile climate goals with the industry. It's one of those energy industries that have mostly been affected by these goals. I'll be focusing now more towards our area and the upstream industry here. Although it's a small area relative to the world, we have a very diverse activity. We have the East Mediterranean, which currently is driving the growth, especially through the offshore gas in Israel, and the discoveries in Cyprus and Egypt. And we have to bear in mind that one of the reasons, many of the reasons that drive that part of the region ahead compared to the rest, the Black Sea coming in second, and then the continental, let's say, Southeast Europe, is not only the geological and geophysical part of that, but has to do more with licensing, proper diplomacy, the fiscal regimes, a strategy that has been put on a table and has been agreed upon by the political systems in these places, the decisions that they have made towards hydrocarbon exploration. Coming in second place, the Black Sea, somewhere in between. It has advanced more the last few years, especially with some important discoveries, namely the Neptune Deep offshore Romania, and the Black Sea is picking up the pace regarding the exploration and production. Obviously, Turkey in that regard is more advanced. Coming to the Southeast Europe, and that is mostly the Balkans, this is a different story. Most of the countries here are facing, they're declining with regards to exploration. And the reason for that is most of the countries, most of the countries are part of the European Union, so they have to adhere to the policies coming from Brussels. So climate change, energy transition takes up a lot of their policies. Secondly, obviously, geology has to do with that, and not every place has the prolific oil and gas fields in the area. The political systems in this part of the region were not very decisive as to whether they should push ahead with hydrocarbons or not, the exploration or not. Many a time they had to back off. Greece, for example, unfortunately is a good example of that, where the pace is picked up, then it stops, then goes back again, and stops. Hopefully that will change at some point. And so the region is very much dependent upon Europe's diversification strategy. By what I mean is that this area is mainly affected by, and actually that has boosted activity as well at the same time, because of the change in Europe's strategy, especially when it comes imports from Russia. So coming into the countries themselves, and I'm not going to read all these numbers, you will find them in the publication. I just want to show you how these places are different, as I mentioned before. So you see over here, these 4 countries, as we speak, are in the strongest position. We've got Israel, we've got Turkey, and just take a look at just have a look at the wells that were drilled back in Jesus, I can't seem to. Look at the wells drilled in 2024. There were 119 wells drilled in Turkey, similar number to the year before, and that's been happening for quite some time now. Comparing that to our country, for instance, it's a big difference. For us, it's 0. So also you see Israel. Production for 2023 was almost 25 BCM. Almost half of that was exported. And from that, the exports went to Egypt mainly and Jordan. And then you have Egypt, which is obviously a big key player with regards to exploration and production. Although we had a fallback on a big decrease in 2022, in 2023 by almost 11% in gas production, and that has affected obviously the whole regional energy security aspect. And John Roberts mentioned before in his presentation how Egypt pretty much absorbs all the gas in the region, and that's probably going to happen also in the next years. I think that will continue going on, and so this is a big, also important factor to factor in regarding whether this region can become an export to the EU, which is something, a second question that has to be answered. And then you have also Cyprus. So these 4 countries are leading the way in the moment in the East Med. Then we have Romania, which is getting closer to that big main group. Romania has a very long story. If people don't know it, but it's over 150 years history of exploration and production. And the world's first oil refinery was there, and it was the very first oil producer. I don't know whether that's true because I'm not a historian, but they say that also that during the Second World War, when Adolf Hitler moved towards this place, conquered Romania, he was actually going after the oil fields in the region. Recently, Romania, and it was mentioned by Mr. Stambolis earlier today, Romania is a gas exporter, and it's becoming a very important intra-European, let's say, exporter, and so it's a very well diversified actor. Recently, there was a big discovery, the Neptune Deep offshore Romania, which will it's got about 100 BCM of recoverable reserves, and this has been going in the development further in the near future. And recently, just last summer, there was a new discovery, a much smaller one, but that shows the potential of the region. We have Croatia also, which also has a quite long history of exploration, especially during the Soviet era, and that was done mainly by the main state oil company INA, which now has been privatized, and it's together with excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. Which is into exploration and production at the moment, either on its own or through joint ventures like they have with Energean, and they just recently had a FED for development for the Irena field. And the production and the gas production, the oil production, the gas production for Croatia, it's relatively low numbers, but they have an industry going on there. Albania, although has a very long history, recently they had some fallbacks, although all their oil production has been exported because of the lack of refinery. But they have, the production has decreased a lot, it has halved since the peak of 2014. There hasn't been any new commercial discovery to date. And just last year, Shell withdrew from Block 4. They had the decision actually to withdraw from the country in full, but that hasn't happened yet. And towards the end, although Bulgaria is in a much better position than Greece, unfortunately, back in a few years ago, like 5-6 years ago, they had a change of heart regarding hydrocarbons exploration production, and that resulted in major changes. Total Energies and Repsol left, and from the 13 concessions that we had active back in 2020. Today we only have 8 active blocks that are held by ExxonMobil and Energean and Hellenic. There's one in the North Aegean Sea which is under force majeure since the incidents with Turkey back in 1987. And there's 4 blocks, the recent blocks that everyone's been talking about, the ones that Chevron finally, after almost 8-9 years of going into and looking into the data, they finally expressed their interest to come in the country. These 4 blocks are currently pending approval by the parliament, if I'm not mistaken. The good news is that it seems that finally we'll have a well towards the end of the year, early next year. And hopefully at some point we'll see wells being drilled offshore Crete, which is these 2 places will be, God willing, will be game changers for the whole region. If all the evidence that we have seen, and I see Mr. Grigoriou there, who's quite familiar with these places, if all these evidences come to life. Bulgaria has currently 4 active concessions. Mainly the gas fields are onshore in the western northwest parts of the country, and there's 2 offshore blocks, Hanan Sparuh and Han Tervel. There was a well. There hasn't been a successful. It's not no wells drilled. It should say no successful wells offshore drills yet. And hopefully there's going to be a second in Han Sparuh, and we'll see how that goes. And to conclude, we have seen that how we know that the hydrocarbon they still remain central to global demand and supply. There is the energy transition is quite uneven in our region. Other places, as we see, like Greece and the rest of the Southeast European countries, they have taken it more seriously. The places in the East Mediterranean are pushing forwards with, and they don't seem to want to stop that with hydrocarbon exploration. And currently, mature basins like North Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and other places around the world, mainly those 2, are the main drivers that keep the industry running in terms of exploration and production. There is the frontier areas that there is frontier areas in the world like Suriname, Guyana. There's Brazil and a new hotspot that has been created by Total Energies and Shell in offshore Namibia. There's the national oil companies, as we said, are the main oil reserve holders in the world, and they dominate the sector. Also, many of them are part of the OPEC, so that's another parameter. The technology, the advancement of technology extends the life of oil fields, not only on new oil fields, but existing oil fields. The East Med leads the regional growth, the Black Sea coming in second, and mainly our area, as I said, is mostly constrained by the political realities that take place in the area. Ultimately, everything depends on the choices made today, how the future of the hydrocarbon industry will play out, both in our region and in the future. I mentioned Namibia before, and I want to, if I have a couple of minutes, because it's a very good example of how a country that was way backwards regarding hydrocarbon is now in the lens of the industry. So about 12 years ago, I was country manager of the company, an Oslo-listed company I was working for, Spectrum, which is a seismic company, and I was managing new projects for Namibia. Back then, it was 2014, Namibia had only had a producing field, the Kudu field, and they actually had no idea about the potential of the whole country. We're talking about offshore, okay? The company I worked for, we wanted to go in there, shoot new seismic, scan the whole area, and see if we can work things out. We were certain, because we also had the Orange Basin in the part of South Africa, which we knew there was a good potential, so we could take that as an analog and expand it further up north into Namibia. So to cut a long story short, Namibia took the right steps from almost zero, from 2013. They took small steps. They didn't change anything from their strategy. They wanted to see what's going on offshore in the offshore areas in their country. They took small steps. They had some failed wells. However, at some point they hit the jackpot with systematic work, with good knowledge that came in the country. I remember we were training the geologists in their national regulator, and now they're in the hotspot with Shell and Total Energies really taking a big step in there, and many other companies wanting to get in there. And with that, I want to thank you for your time, and
so we have reached the end of this workshop, if you like. We ran out of time, so although we had some notion of having questions and answers, I think it's it's too late. So I'd like to thank everybody for your presence here, your attendance, and we'll be very happy to answer questions by email anytime that you wish to inquire about things, about the outlook and other issues. So I would be very happy if you could join us for a drink outside. Thank you very much.